Well, hello everyone, and welcome to this panel discussion for GMIS, the Global Manufacturing and Industrialisation Summit. I'm Declan Curry. I've been a journalist and broadcaster covering this area for about 30 years. This session is glocalisation, from global to local. More than 2/3 of world trade occurs through global value chains where production crosses borders before making it to the final assembly lines. Digital developments are transforming these global value chains by creating a new digital thread, allowing for advanced systems of traceability and improved logistics and planning. The fourth industrial revolution and its technological advancements have the potential to overcome the physical barriers imposed by any crisis, such as coronavirus, and to give societies the digital freedom to achieve economic and social prosperity. We're going to discuss this with our speakers in this session. They are Dr. Volker Trier of the Association of German Chambers of Industry and Commerce. He is the Chief Executive of Foreign Trade. Dr. Nicholas Garrett of the RCS Global Group. That's a company which develops and manages audit programs for responsible sourcing. He is the Chief Executive. Dr. Nan Chunhui of the China Federation of Industrial Economics. That's a federation of 178 industrial associations in China, where he is the vice chairman. Those of you who are watching this discussion, we invite you to take part in the discussion by leaving your comments on social media or by following us on Twitter or Instagram. We are at GMI Summit. So, Dr. Trier, if I may start the discussion with you, looking at trading as a result of the pandemic, will the pandemic further consolidate trading in digital marketplaces?
The short answer is yes. The longer answer is that we have experienced a decade on growth in goods and services, whereby services trade have been grown by 50% more than that of goods. And we have to differentiate in a short-term view and a medium perspective. Right now, we have a setback in globalization, a setback in investments, especially affects the trading of goods, and when it comes to the obstacles for trading of goods, we have to take into account that there is a certain trend towards nationalists and even understandable behavior of the different states in order to protect very high-value goods like medical equipments, vaccines, and all that type of to dampen the effects of the virus. But this affects also the general perspective. And in a medium term, and the differentiation goes also to more service-oriented trading, e-commerce, and all that kind of stuff. There we have a boost in that because we see that mobility, physical mobility, is restricted, and the trading of data flows is not. So therefore, we have the boost on that.
Thank you. Dr. Garrett, it probably shouldn't surprise us that we see a greater importance of digital in this area when we look at everyday life. So much more of what we do has become digital because of the pandemic. This is a trend that is continuing at pace.
Yeah, certainly. Look, for me, it's really a trend that has already been in existence prior. The pandemic has certainly accelerated it. In our field, which is the electric vehicle and battery technology space, coupled with the raw material space, ultimately the raw materials that make up these batteries that we need in significant volumes. there are concrete efforts underway to create these digital marketplaces and to also really build them out. Often that's utilizing innovative technology like blockchain, for example. A key precursor to the functioning of these marketplaces, particularly those that come with a sustainability claim, which is increasingly important, is obviously the combination of the implementation of digital product traceability systems so that allow you to exactly demonstrate where the origin of your product is, and to couple these with really credible sustainability assurance data. Now, there are a couple of examples, I think, that sort of illustrate this. You know, at first there were efforts that were focused on parts of the supply chain. The Better Sourcing Program is a good example. And now, with IBM, we've just partnered up to do an end-to-end effort, really. So from mines and recycling, plants all the way to global OEMs, through the Responsible Sourcing Blockchain Network, which is an initiative that's also supported by Ford, Volkswagen, LG Chem, Glencore, and other major corporations. And what we see there that these are really full value chain wide systems connecting companies that are linked through trade, through a technology platform. And this ultimately enables these companies to reduce risks, to add significant value to their products, and to do so through the exact measurement of the responsibility and the origin of the product they procure, manufacture, and sell. And ultimately, this yields major market advantages, risk management and efficiency advantages, and obviously in the procurement, but also in the sale of their manufactured goods. So yeah, we see some practical examples really where this is already being fully advanced.
And Dr. Garrett, when you look at that digitalization of the specific steps along the supply chain, can you say that it is optimizing the value of the chain itself?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think in the end you have, particularly if you have a network effect, so if you know, full value chains are actually operating and are linked through the same network, ultimately, you know, it is no longer only about claims of the individual company, but ultimately also of how you perform all together. The bigger element is obviously the advantages that you gain in supply chain transparency and the ultimate you know, ability on the back of that to drive supply chain rationalization. In the past, it was a very lengthy process of supply engagement and supply chain interrogation to find out who is actually in your supply chain. Never mind, you know, whether they were a risky supplier or whether that supplier's product came from a questionable source or origin. Now, if you connect suppliers through these digital systems, you have these serious efficiency gains in supply risk management, engagement, and you can reduce the time required to obtain this sort of crucial decision-making information from several months in the past to minutes or even seconds when they're linked through a digital system. And what we see is that OEMs in particular, so the downstream part of the supply chain, is using this kind of newfound insight and end-to-end visibility to really drive supply chain rationalization. You have a trend towards lesser but better performing suppliers, a trend towards you know, end-to-end supply chain transparency as a means to manage risks, and of course, and a very innovative approach is for OEMs to actually jump over the value chain and procure raw material inputs, for example, in our case, directly at source, i.e. an OEM entering into contractual relationships such as BMW has with a set of mining companies, simply because they know or have a feeling that these companies produce more responsible product than others.
Mr. Nan Chung Kwai, thank you so much for joining us in this discussion. What do you think about this question? Will trading further consolidate into digital marketplaces as a result of the pandemic?
那么疫情之下许多展会呢面临着停摆，人员流动也受限，然后呢，数字贸易和跨境电商，这个是帮助我们企业突破疫情障碍，实现快速匹配供和需，持续释放经贸合作潜力的重要载体了。像我们中国广交会有着63年历史的广交会，也首次把这个广交会搬上了云端，吸引了数以万计的中外企业 已开启了国际贸易长销数字化的一个新时代。以中国跨境电商综合试验区也从原来的59个扩大到了105个。今年上半年全国的货物贸易额同比呢是下降了3.2%，但是呢跨境电商平台进出口的逆势方面增长它是逆势增长了26.2%，这个呢就充分的展示了数字贸易的强大韧性。像我们正泰呢是一家工业电气与新能源企业，我们呢整合跨境电商的资源，也在拓展网络社交平台，向海外客户也在线上开展直线线上直播等等这种方式，供和采双方从面对面到平对平的过程当中，不仅能为企业拓展营销渠道，增强抵抗风险能力，也是对未来贸易模式的一个新的一个探索。所以数字贸易需要与之相适应的统一、公平、高效的新的全球贸易规则。但是呢，当前并没有明确的贸易规则来规范数字贸易，因此我们需要尽快的建立起国际间的合作机制，来完善信息共享渠道，才能够助推数据自由流动，使我们的这个数字化市场得到快速的发展。
Thank you. Dr. Trier, looking and listening to what your members, the best of German industry, say about this, what are the steps in the supply chain that digitalization is improving?
Some people are discussing about the end of globalization due to what has happened in the pandemic. And then we have the structural trend of the greater extent and the better development in digital trading and investing according to the new technologies. What we see right now, and we are surveying our members regularly twice a year, the internationally oriented German businesses with their on their international locations, and our latest survey shows that there is a reshaping in globalization due to the pandemic, but also due to the structural change towards more a digital trend. So we have almost 40% of our companies who are telling us that they are looking for new suppliers. That means what Niklas mentioned is absolutely true. Some do want to overcome different steps in their supply chains due to the digital trends, more producing on the spot where the customers are, and this is an ongoing trend, but then also due to the question of responsibility in the supply chain. We have a huge intense debate here in Germany about responsibility in the global supply chains of German producers and what is happening there. Are there violations in human rights in the supply chains, and how to prevent? So this is an ongoing, very intense debate, and this also shapes the localization and the question where to produce, where to source, and where to relocate. And then we have the question of specific sectors. And when it comes to all the health issues, then we have, it seems to me that we have a kind of a relocalization because risks aversity is now much greater than before. And then we have the normal trend of what kind of place where to produce is, what is the expenditure, what are the wage costs, what is the tax system and all that. And then we have, and last but not least, we have this trend of, or the discussion about decoupling in different economic zones. So your question is the more than $1 million question, I might say, due to the extent of German business abroad. Our export quota to GDP is 50%, compared with a country like Japan, which has a comparable figures in GDP and in population. They have 15%. So we are dependent on open markets, but we have this trend of a decoupling in different economic zones. And this is really worrisome for German businesses. And so we stand at crossroads where the globalization is navigating.
Mr. Nan, from the businesses that you represent, from your knowledge of industry, how is digitalization altering the specific steps in these global value chains?
这个数字化、智能化是能够有效地提升生产管理效率，为研发提供综合服务，为生产制造提供技术支持，使销售及售后协同发展，促进企业商业模式的变革，进而呢推动企业价值链的重塑。比如我们正在面向全球用途开放的光伏制造加互联网透明工厂，就是从原材料的进场检验到成品包装到运输安装，每一个环节每一项数据都有记录，开创了1分钟网络下单，6个小时工厂生产，48个小时配送安装，原监控直播全程，30年的质量保障，有这么一个开创的一个模式，实现了72小时的无服务模式。正泰的泰国工厂，我们的泰国工厂就是通过互联网平台远程监控管理，达到呢制造标准统一，不受地域国界限制等。就是现在疫情严重的这个下面，泰国工厂我们就通过空间的这种互联网的管理统一的标准，他在那边所有的生产制造，我们在这边全面的通过互联网，通过大数据，通过云平台进行监管，所以就保证了疫情期间的正常生产。
And Dr. Trier, this fits in with any current discussion about how economies grow again after the coronavirus pandemic. All the major economies are looking to stimulate rapid growth. Is innovation in supply chain, in its management, in its traceability, does that create global opportunities for growth?
Innovation is the key driver, but right now it is spoiled by political factors. There are countries in the world which are on the issue of innovation are really far beyond others, but are envisaged by other countries. So I speak about the United States versus China. And thereby I speak about China and East Asia and the competition about some other East Asian countries between USA and China. Not to say about is there a Western world? Is there United States and the European Union? Or is it even European Union versus or against United States? When we think about questions like the value chains of commodities, we have We have a dispute here in Germany right now with the United States and the question of energy supply to Germany, not to say to Europe, because in Europe you don't have one voice on that issue as well. So, but innovation is the key driver. But right now there are interferences which is due to the pandemic. There is a greater threat in the different societies that absolutely crucial imported goods cannot enter the country, and therefore some trade barriers are built up even stronger than before. And even before the pandemic, we were in a world, not to say trade war, but large trade conflicts on large scale. And this is pressing down a bit the question of innovation. We in Germany and in Europe, we try to avoid to strongly be part of that competition or that conflict. And we do say we need a globalization, we need a multilateral approach. And this includes the new world of e-trade, of digital trade and all that kind of stuff. But we have not agreed on coming architecture, how to deal with that.
Mr. Nan, we're seeing tremendous innovation in these online marketplaces. How is that creating global business opportunity? How is that improving and creating end-to-end value chains?
这是近年来啊，随着我们中国在5G、工业互联网等领域的投入啊，也借助呢数字化技术来实现商业模式的创新。比如说，在能源领域，就是利用数字技术引导能量有序的流动，构筑起更高效、更清洁、更经济的这么一个现代能源体系。我们数字化了能源系统，能够准确的判断谁需要能源，谁这个多少需要多少啊，就明确的如何能够在合适的时间、合适的地点，以最低的成本来提供能源。所以啊，新的能源商业模式正在形成。那么我们正在建设的电站，有光伏电站，分布在全国各地乃至海外50多个国家。我们就是采用互联网、大数据、AI 等新技术、新的方法来实现管控和运维，实现呢对光伏电站实时监测分析，大幅的提高发电效率，降低成本，而且提高了安全运营。也就是说，在可预计的未来，能源数字化将实现跨越式的发展，绘就一张智能化能源的蓝图。
Thank you. Dr. Garrett, if the pandemic has taught us anything, it is that we need resilience in our business and economic systems. When you look at value chains and the digitalization of them, how do we build in flexibility as well as economic efficiency?
Look, in the end, again, I can best speak to obviously the sort of like industries that I'm most familiar with, meaning the raw material and the sort of EV industries. Now, global value chains and their makeup will continue to be determined by where the expertise is, where the required raw material resources are, and where energy resources are available at a competitive cost to refine the raw materials that are required, obviously, to make batteries, right? And it will take time, even for ambitious regions like Europe, to catch up with the Chinese, for example, on the battery manufacturing side of things. The US, with the exception of Tesla, perhaps, is massively behind in that race. But looking at this, for me, I think we'll have increasing, flexibility as well. Now, a core element here, and I completely agree with what Dr. Trier has said here, is that increasingly for global corporations, at least, that element of responsibility is absolutely crucial. And who can really get that right? And that is ultimately a kind of like a flexibility determining factor. Now, the battery value chain is going to be a $250 billion market. And Europe, while knowing that it's unlikely going to be able to compete with China on price, is convinced that it can manufacture the best, most efficient and most sustainable batteries. Now, knowing how risk exposed these global value chains of battery raw materials are, I would place a big bet on the success of that mantra. Now, China, in turn, really needs to catch up on responsibility and sustainability. This is the key area where they are not performing as well as the European producers. But once China can really manage or really merge its highly efficient production capacities with demonstrable and believable sustainability credentials, China will be an even bigger force to be reckoned with. So if I was the Chinese president, I would require Chinese companies to place massive emphasis on sustainability going forward in order to not fall behind the procurement decisions that the European manufacturers are doing, for example.
Mr. Nam, what do you think? What effect does the pandemic have on the resilience of supply chains when we see some nations around the world hoard supplies and preserve essential and important items for their own use? What impact does that have on supply chains and world trade?
这疫情啊，正在破坏全球制造业的基本原则，全球供应链正在经受经济与政治的双重压力，正在发生裂变与重组。选择性的自给自足的实用主义模式会加速发展。全球供应链是经济全球化的产物，各个经济体相互开放，供应链才能够生存发展。供应链不管是企业产业，还是城市区域，还是国家，不管哪个层级，都涉及供给端与需求端。哪个环节不稳定，出现断裂的话，就会危及到整个产业链。因此，各国政府一定要坚定不移地采取有效的措施，加快经济恢复，保障全球供应链稳定和畅通。那么，新冠疫情给全球供应链的正常运行带来的冲击是非常巨大的，也给我们企业经营带来了非常大的影响。但是，同时也推动了数字技术和创新模式的发展。例如，供应链数字化的转型，它可以实现企业间的生产关系规划和协调，而且还可以加快对生产流程和客户行为模式更细致的了解，通过数字化监控整体产业链，来提高各环节的透明性，实现快速响应和及时可控的调度。同时呢，又降低供应链管理和交易成本。所以呢，事物都是一分为二既有不好的，也有通过创新可能会带来更积极的一面。我呢是抱着乐观的态度克服困难永远往前走，通过创新使我们供应链做得更好。
Mr. Nan, China is such an important nation in the development of global value chains, yet critics say that you need to demonstrate better to the rest of the world that your products are sustainable. Would more transparent traceability be helpful to China and to its trading partners?
是，这个中国企业中国政府大家都非常积极的推动这个贸易的全球化，所以在这个供应链方面呢，我们同样会通过创新，通过努力通过变革，利用互联网技术，尽可能的前面我怎么讲的然后呢，把这个空中的桥梁搭起来尽量的推动贸易的便利性，而且呢，它从数字化赋能，使它的实现精准性和它效率提高之后降本增效使我们的合作伙伴，使我们供应链里面的各方都能够受益。这个呢，也是我们中国的企业在这个贸易当中，我们深切感受到 只有加强数字化建设，加强互联网化，才能够使我们通过创新各方受益啊。所以这样的话呢，我们通过经济的发展来推动啊各个地区啊贸易伙伴之间大家都能够实现可持续发展。否则的话啊这个大家都觉得你也封闭起来，我也封闭起来啊，这个事情对于经济社会的发展进步是不利的。所以我们作为中国的企业，一定会按照这个政府的要求啊，我们也会按照市场化的要求啊，把改革开放创新力度加得更大，做得更好。这就是我们基本的想法。我们一定会拥抱全球化。
Dr. Trier, how do we get efficiency and flexibility at the same time?
There's a trade conflict, a trade-off between both. So, and we have this micro view of one company, or the B2B approach, or also the B2C, where there should be investments really close to the customer. But there are different locational factors which prevents the proximity of being so close to the customer. This is one thing. The other thing is that flexibility and efficiency, that there is a trade-off due to the fact that we are in between really a new kind of and locational competition, and that brings me to say that the national states are on the rise in their behavior. We have it internally. We have urged our federal government to have a greater role in the market activities, due to the fact that we have losses in turnovers or close down, shutdowns of production for around about 2 months in end of March till mid of May. And this was worldwide, and this has brought us here in lobby activities to urge the governments to do more. And now the government is growing, and this is a worldwide phenomenon, and this brings also kind of a self-confidence, and this goes at the expense of efficiency. But this is one efficiency, or this is the inefficiency due to the question of this shutdowns due to the virus, the spread of the virus. But the other inefficiency, what I do mean is that trading of goods, that the WTO is really in weak performance. We do not have yet an agreement of what we once agreed on at the beginning of the 90s, for instance. But what we did not agree on either, and this is even more important, is what are the rules of the game when we speak about digital trade and digital investments. What kind of rules do we all agree, or what are the crucial questions? Yeah, the property of digital ownership, cybersecurity, and all that. And then these questions are related to what we speak in Germany, or what we label as Industry 4.0. We are producing the hard fact to make it black and white. Yeah, United States and more China are very good in the new technologies. Also due to different regulations between the different economic zones in the European Union, we do not have a digital single market, but we need one. And then we need a discussion what could be rules of the game on the global scene. So, but right now we do not have a really platform. Where do we discuss this? We don't have a transatlantic partnership which is really well functioning, how it did in former times, just to mention this. So there are many concerns regarding this, but the opportunities on the other side, that flexibility and efficiency, that there is no, theoretically, that there is no trade-off. There are great potentials, but right now I do see a trade-off. We run into inefficiencies because we don't have the flexibilities due to the behavior of the national states.
Well, Mr. Nunn, how do you see this issue? How do we build flexibility as well as efficiency into value chains?
这个就是像现在全球供应链大家都是在强力追求效率的缩影，是激励竞争的必然产物。目前全球产业链格局是各种要素长期综合作用，各国的企业共同努力、共同选择的结果。疫情对全球供应链的影响，在短期主要表现为订单的交货延迟，这个和生产规模的下降。而在长期呢，主要表现应该是供应链结构和关系的深层次变化。疫情并未改变各国的成本结构和技术能力，各国的要素成本和中美贸易摩擦走向仍然是未来影响全球供应链走向的最主要因素。过去的几十年当中，由于中国制造业的快速崛起，全球供应链集中化的趋势不断的在加强。未来随着中国要素成本上升，美国贸易政策调整和新冠肺炎疫情等因素的影响，越来会越凸显的产业链安全因素，越来越凸显的产业链安全因素，将会驱动全球供应链体系朝着多元化和分散化的方向发展。同时呢，也要综合权衡供应链效率与灵活性。从长期来看，两者要兼顾。
Thank you. Just a final thought, Dr. Garrett, if I may. Looking forward, as we emerge from this crisis, is the world a little bit less global, a little bit less globalized than it was before?
In my view, perhaps it is. I do think we're going through an exceptional phase of politicization of the business world. Obviously, a little bit of nation state or national government interference, particularly amongst certain superpowers. At the same time, I think, particularly with the onset of the digital systems, we're making the world better connected. And in the end, certainly in the industries that I'm most familiar with, it continues to be a global operation. And it's one where increasingly, end users and suppliers and producers of raw materials are working much more closely together, irrespective of where exactly they're based. And I think that makes me very hopeful that, we're not seeing the end of globalization here, but simply a coming closer together. At least certainly if this may be that it's sectorially specific, but that's my view.
Mr. Nunn, how do we use these value chains to bring prosperity to the whole world? How do we bring prosperity to nations with large young populations?
其实呢，全球价值链的核心地位是由成本、市场、效率、政策等等，它是一个综合因素，长期积累而形成的一个优势。年轻化呢，当然是一个重要的因素之一当然它是综合的。那么在构建全球价值链的过程当中，有许多考虑因素，比如说成本最小化、基础设施较好、营商环境良好、产业的齐全度、靠近最终产品消费者等等。当然，成本最小化并不是全球供应链配置的唯一的考虑因素。未来，普通的劳动力在全球价值链中的地位也将会大幅的下滑。劳动力短缺问题 可以采取自动化、智能化这一些措施的应对，满足它的需要。例如，中国有深厚的工业基础，产业的积极度比较高，产业齐全度与规模效应良好，而且拥有良好的产业生态，特别是中国拥有全球最大的一个市场潜力。这些呢，其实都是能使中国成为全球制造中心的一些优势的预备的条件。所以我认为呢，这一块这个人口年轻化仅仅是其中一个因素之一，不应该成为决定性因素。
Dr. Trier, that's the theme of this panel, glocalization from global to local. Is that how the future looks to you? Less global, more local?
It will be more local, but that does not mean it is not a no-brainer that means less global. There is the potential that we can be more decentralized, but at the same time cooperating and working on different regional agreements, but as well on the multilateral system. Right now, I have great concern that we are in a period of really a setback to globalization, but it might change in the near future. And there are some good signs that we are not at the end of globalization, have not reached the end of globalization yet. Take my country, Germany. We really were behaving like many other countries at the beginning of this crisis. We started with export restrictions to crucial, to very sensitive goods when it comes to all the health issues. We started with export restrictions, and we are one of the export, some say we are export champions. In the meantime, China has accelerated, and we are only export vice champions. So, but we do export restrictions, and this provokes or could provoke other countries to say tit for tat. So we eliminated this because we do understand that this is not the way a country like Germany should behave. So even in that very sensible field of pharmaceuticals and so far we did in amidst the crisis. It was in April like this. So this positive sign that even Germans can change their mind brings me to say that I do have hope that this is not an irreversible trend. What we do see right now, our companies say that NTBs, non-tariff barriers, that tariff barriers, that customs are on the rise at the moment. This is true when it comes to goods, and when it comes to services and all that kind of e-trade, e-commerce and all that stuff. We have not even reached rules of the game, but that does not exclude that there could be an agreement very soon, because many countries will see that this type of behavior goes at the expense of the welfare of the people. And right now we speak about jobs. We have not seen the highest numbers in unemployment figures worldwide, because labor markets are reacting, is a lagging behind factor. We have seen loss of turnovers in sales and so far, but now companies are going more and more into direction to have to they have to sell off a working force. So and this brings yeah, this is, it's not cynically what I do mean, but in a political debate, an internal political debate, the question of the numbers of jobs are very crucial for our precondition for changing behavior, and we need a change of behavior. And then we have really great potential that with all the technologies we can really tackle climate change, we can tackle resource problems, allocation problems. So the potential are great, but right now the state of play is not in the best shape.
Mr. Nan, we see tension between China and the United States. We see President Trump take action against Chinese companies. What impact does that have on global value chains? Is there a concern that China may be locked out of some supply chains?
我想这个主要是对于这个经济来讲，对于贸易来讲，我们从企业角度，我们希望大家能够合作共赢，不是你死我活，不是我有或者我呢大发财，你呢都不要。其实作为这个商业来讲，就是合作共赢嘛，互利共赢。所以我相信，只有大家能够把这些这个趋利的活动多做，多利他精神下，大家都能够实现共赢的话，我相信最终这个合作共赢一定会这个赢得大多数人的支持。所以中国的企业也好，中国的政府也好，一直在推崇这种文化价值理念。我相信这种价值文化理念一定会赢得包括美国政府大多数或者绝大多数有明智理智的这个大多数人群的支持，也包括美国的企业，也包括全世界的大家都期盼和平，期盼盈利，期盼经济发展，社会稳定。我相信一定会这个正义的一方一定会得到绝大多数人的支持。
Mr. Nan, just a last thought from you in the future after the pandemic. Is the world less global? Are global supply chains likely to get smaller?
这个新冠疫情的确对各国带来的经济活动的影响非常大。这个的话呢，我相信通过疫苗，通过大家的对这个病毒的认识，通过这种这个互相这个共存这种原则下我相信适应之后应该说会稳定下来。那么各国的经济发展也会随着新冠疫情的这个大家的疫苗出现不恐慌以后呢，这种经济活动逐步起来之后那么这个危机呢总会过去的。我相信各国企业各国人民共同携手努力那么战胜疫情，然后赢得发展一定是一个主流。我相信这个将来的发展应该会越来越好。当然这个过程是蛮艰难的，受阻我相信是短暂的也许1年，也许2年，也许3年5年，但总会过去的所以发展曙光太阳总会升起的，所以我们始终对未来要充满着期待，要有信心一定要坚持充满着期待就只要你有信心只有你有期待我相信一切困难都能够克服的，都能够过去的，未来一定会更好。
Thank you. That brings this discussion to a close. I say thank you to all of our speakers. I also thank you for your attention. We're going to take a short break just now, but stay tuned because the sessions at the GMIS will resume shortly.